Welcome back to another video here in the character creation series, and today we're going to be taking our base mesh that now has anatomical details sculpted into it, and we are going to be blocking in the clothing for this character. Now, the first thing you need to do when you block in clothing is to know exactly what the clothing is supposed to look like. Now, at this point, I don't have concept art. What I'm going to be using instead is photographic reference. So I have here a folder in which I have assembled a few images of what it is that I'm going to be doing with this character. So my goal here is to use the survival jacket from the Star Trek Beyond film. I used the character creation game that I had played, and I had rolled Star Trek, and so I need to make a character from that franchise. And instead of going with something that is one of the characters from the movie or something like that, I'm going to actually try and go a little different in making someone in universe, but not specifically someone from the film. So my goal is to make a female Vulcan member of Starfleet that will be wearing the uniform that is seen on both Kirk and Chekhov in Star Trek Beyond. And so I've gone and grabbed a bunch of reference images here of this jacket and what it looks like. There's some really nice close-up detail in which I can see the fabric weave and the pattern that I'm going to need to reproduce at some point. And more importantly, I can kind of see the fit of this jacket. There's some concept art of it there. And I can actually see Chris Pine wearing it here. So this is going to be pretty ideal for me to create this jacket. Now, I don't know that I'm going to have it undone. I haven't decided that yet, but I'm going to do my block-in mesh as though it were done up. And if I want to go undone at some point, I can always go and do that. So things that I kind of want to concentrate on here are the nice, really cornered shoulders. Those are really, really nice. And then also kind of this tapered flow that goes here. Now, I haven't seen this particular jacket on the female form. I've only seen this jacket worn by two male actors. And so because of that, I'm going to have to actually make a few alterations to this in order to make it fit the female form. So that's what it looks like I'm going to be doing here. So I'm going to go and drag this off to the side and keep it off screen here. I don't actually need it to be a part of ZBrush or the interface. I'm just going to keep it off screen so I can see it as I go. I'm going to bring my reference folder back over to the other monitor as well. And I can now go in and start on my anatomical sculpt here to block in where I want the clothing to go. So in this case, there are three main articles of clothing that I need to do. I need to do the jacket, I need to do the pants, and then I would need to do an undershirt of some kind, even if I don't plan on having the jacket undone. Because I'm going to be creating clothing in Marvelous Designer, having an undershirt of some kind is going to actually help that jacket along. And so those are the things that I'm going to have to do. Now, I'm sure if I went through the film, I would probably be able to find Kirk or Chekhov having taken off that jacket so you could see what the undershirt looks like. But since I'm not going to worry about that, and I'm not going to have my character without the jacket removed, when I get to the undershirt here, I'm just going to make a t-shirt for her. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to go in, let's turn on symmetry, and all I'm going to do is just mask out where I want this t-shirt to go. So in the case of my model here, I'm kind of picking a mid arm for the sleeve length here, and this is going to go and kind of cover the majority of her torso. I'm using Chris Pine's jacket as the reference for where I actually want this to go. And so I'm going in and kind of just identifying the neckline here on that actor to kind of make it fit with her. And so something about in that vein I think is going to work. It's not, again, going to sit exactly the same way on her form, and so we will have to make adjustments. But all I want to do here really is just kind of block this in to a point that I'm okay with the way that it looks. Okay, now I'm going to also make her shirt longer than I would presume it actually is, and the reason for that is that once I create her pants, I'm going to want to tuck this shirt into the pants as a means of making it stay pretty. This is a formal uniform, and so it would be pretty neat and proper. So I don't want to have anything untucked or anything like that. And so what I'm going to do is, let's undo that, get a really nice hem here going around her waistline. And if I really, really wanted to, I could actually turn this into a bodysuit, which would actually help keep it on her body a little bit more. So why don't we actually go and do that? That'll give me the ability to keep this in position here on her frame without it going away. Now, this is not completely unheard of in the Star Trek universe, as I've seen characters wear something similar in Star Trek Enterprise, which is one of the television series. That is not the series that I'm creating here, so I'm going to kind of make this a little bit more my own and not follow that pattern exactly. But that's kind of a little bit of an indication that I can get away with this and have it still feel proper and accurate. Again, this bodysuit part here that I'm making that's going to end up underneath her pants, really not as concerned about its design or its look as what I'm going to be doing here again is going to be just about making this make sense in terms of the outward appearance of this. And so this will kind of act as both her undergarments here, her underwear, and an undershirt. So she's kind of got one full body piece on. Once I've got a mask here that I'm pleased with and I'm happy with the way that it looks, the next thing that I want to do is I want to go in and extract a new piece of geometry from this. Now, I'm on my high subdivision level, which was subdivision level 4, which I used to sculpt this anatomy in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to the subtool palette, or the subtool panel in the tool palette, and I'm going to head down to the extraction button here, and I'm going to hit extract. Now, when you hit the extract button, it gives you a preview of what that extraction is going to look like, which as I go and rotate, the preview disappears. And so what this does is it gives you the ability to kind of hone in on that thickness that you're trying to achieve. I can see here that this default thickness, or the current thickness of 0.02, is way too much. That's not going to work for me. And so I'm going to want to bring that down. Let's do 0.005. Let's bring that down to 1/4 of its thickness. That's a little bit better. Let's go and do that. So when I'm happy with the thickness here, I'm going to hit accept. Now this is going to convert whatever my selection was into a new subtool, which I now currently have. This is going to be her bodysuit. And it also, if I go back to her body here and we solo this, it didn't clear the mask. So this is something you want to pay attention to, because the bodysuit is covering that mask, and so you can't actually see it. So if I wanted to go and put pants on her or whatnot, it may kind of screw me up a little bit down the road if there's actually still some torso kind of masked here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure to remember to clear the mask on the rest of her body before jumping in to the bodysuit here and doing some modifications to this. So the very first thing that I want to do is that the bodysuit currently, the way that it was extracted is that it has an interior and an exterior. And so it gave it some thickness, and I don't actually need anything that's on the interior. We're just going to be doing this as a shell. And the reason for this is that this is just meant to be a preview. This geometry won't actually become any of the part of the actual bodysuit. But what I want to do is I want to use this as a means of kind of defining the pattern that I'm going to be using in Marvelous Designer. And that pattern doesn't need to be two-sided. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and hide the thickness here first and foremost. So Control Shift and click on a polygroup, and then I'm going to go and add to that polygroup all of the areas where there is thickness. Now this is going to hide some other groups that I don't actually want hidden, but that's okay, because I can go into my selection mode here again, invert, and then go and hide the polygroups that are visible. So I should just have, in terms of the thickness here, I'm missing one. Her leg hole here is missing. We're going to go and bring that, that to the party. And there we go. So I'm just going to group these guys together. I'm going to say auto group. Actually, just Control W will group them all together. And then what I want to do is I'm going to auto group the rest of this thing. And what that's going to do, because those polygons are hidden, is that my contiguous group of polygons now is the external shell or the internal shell, giving me the ability to kind of separate those two things. And I really only just want the external shell. Even the thickness, I don't care about that. So under geometry, I'm going to go to modify topology and delete hidden. That will clear any polygons. So if I try to flip invert my what's hidden mask here, you're going to see that nothing changes. We're not able to bring that stuff back. Now, there are problems with this bodysuit. It's not good to go just yet. There are a few things that are not the way that I want them before I start identifying a pattern. So the first thing is that I can still see her individual breasts, which is not ideal. It's not what I would like. And also, I can see that in the sculpting of her bottom here, of her rear end, I've gone and pushed the geometry kind of through itself. And so that's kind of causing a little bit of weirdness here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using Dynamesh. And that's going to be because I want to make some very large changes to this geometry. And so when I do this, it's going to seal up these holes. It's going to make them a solid mesh. And so what we want to do, let's go up here to Dynamesh, and I'm going to increase my resolution to somewhere near about 2000 and see where that gets me. So that's not too bad. I'm at 600,000 polys here. I don't want to go so high with this that I'm unable to smooth my geometry. And you can see that I now have these pink polygroups sealing off the mesh. So that's brilliant. All I want to do now is make this look less like a human body and more like a bodysuit. So I have symmetry turned on. I'm going to darken my color here just a little bit so that I'm not just painting on a white mesh. This will make it a little bit easier to see. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring some of the fabric between her breasts up so that it's actually being stretched across that little valley created by her body, which is what fabric naturally does. And so the more accurate I can get this, it's not too bad. I'm going to also kind of bring it down as well, and then also add a little bit of thickness at the bottom where there might be a little bit of an air pocket where this goes and connects to her body as it kind of flattens out in through here. So I don't need to be crazy accurate with this. I just need the shape to be more correct. And that's kind of what I'm after here. So again, if I go and use my smooth brush and kind of just smooth that out, I'm going to re-Dynamesh this by clicking and dragging a mask on the background. And because of the resolution of my model here, I can see that I'm actually going to need a little bit more out of my smooth brush. And so that is kind of the next thing that I'm going to do here. I'm going to go into my light box, into my brushes, into the smooth brushes, and holding shift, I'm going to toggle the smooth strong brush. This is now going to make it so that when I hold shift, the smooth strong is turned on. And this is actually just going to give me a very strong effect with that. So we can get rid of her navel, which doesn't need to be here. And I want to be careful that I don't sculpt inward here when I do this. I always want to pull the geometry out because this is currently the shape of her body. And so if I start pulling that geometry out, or pushing it in rather, what's going to happen is we are going to end up with it penetrating into her body, which is not exactly what we want. So I'm kind of just flattening out and smoothing some of the shapes here so we can't see her abs as much. And I don't need to go as far as painting wrinkles or anything like that. I may want to also stay out of solo mode just so that I can make sure I don't get to a point here where the smoothing has pushed her outfit into her body. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing with her back and her rear end. So I'm going to go and just in between her scapula, I'm going to go and fill in this little mass a little bit here, where again, the shirt would be pulled across that. We shouldn't see any indication of her spinal column here. That little gap that was placed in the anatomy should be gone as well. And so I do want to kind of fill this in a way that is going to be believable. And so again, just a little bit of sculpting, a little bit of smoothing. And again, I'm going to retopologize this, so I'm not really worried about detail. I want to kind of just get something rather quick here. So we'll get rid of the venous dimples, or the posterior superior ilium spine that we see here. And then I can actually go and get rid of the influence of her bottom as I go through and do this. And so, again, just trying to see what that fabric would look like if it were pulled taut, like so. Which, again, I can go and smooth. I'm going to go and smooth these little transition joints here, too, where this goes against her her actual body here. So any of the places where that pink polygroup originally was. And I'm going to do this to kind of smooth this out just a little bit so that we have a softer transition here. Now that group here has gotten away. You can see that her neck too is creating some kind of funky shapes. And so I want to kind of fill in. I'm really just looking for the voids. I'm looking for any places where her body has peaks, and that those peaks are creating an indentation in the body, or an indentation in this bodysuit, right? So a place where it's lifting the shirt unnaturally. And if I go and smooth this out, something like that, we kind of get to see that bodysuit in a little bit more detail. So with that, I'll do a little bit more up here too. I can still kind of see her trapezius poking through. And a little bit here will cover her deltoids as well. I don't need the shirt to have musculature. So that's starting to look a lot more like the shape that I want it to be. It's starting to look a lot more like the pattern of what this outfit should look like. Now, my next goal here in this bodysuit is going to be to go and identify where the sewing seams are going to go. So this is going to be done at the polygroup level. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to regroup this thing. So I'm going to turn off my Dynamesh. Actually, now that I've done a little bit more sculpting, I'm going to Dynamesh it one more time. And then we're going to turn off the Dynamesh and go into the ZBrush here. And I'm going to reduce this down to, let's say, 20,000 polygons. And let's keep our polygroups as well. So keep groups. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to try and give me a cleaner seam in between wherever that purple and pink area match up or mesh together. And hopefully give me something that looks a little bit more realistic in terms of the shape and the form that it would have. So let's go see what this does here. We're just going to wait on our mesh to go. And you can see that what it's done has actually been pretty good in giving us a clean topological edge around that outfit. So that looks like it's going to work quite nicely. There's a few places here where the topology is a little wonky. I can see right there, which might just actually be an artifact of how this was sculpted. So I might have had something weird going on there in my sculpt. So now that I know that ZBrush is going to work, what I want to do is identify where the sewing lines are going to be on this outfit, where I want to put the stitching on this outfit. And there's a couple of really nice ways that we can go about doing this. So I know that my mesh has a fair amount of a fair amount of resolution to it, right? It's Dynamesh, it's 600,000 polys. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a stroke on the body here somewhere. That's going to turn it into a colorized mesh. And then I'm going to invert my color. And let's actually make this guy white here again for the time being. We'll unpaint this. And the idea here is that I'm going to use this black line to draw where I want the seams to go in this bodysuit. So we're going to isolate this because that will be helpful. And I'm going to go and make sure that all of these guys here, so this is all those internal shapes, I'm going to paint them in black as well. And that's just going to help me when I do my poly grouping here in a moment. Okay, so we're going to bring this back, and I'm going to go BPA. So this is my paintbrush. And what I want to do now is just kind of identify where I would put seams if I was actually stitching this thing together. Now, if you're not familiar with that, where seams would go, and you want to make sure that you're doing something accurate, you can always go and take a look at some reference online. You can always go and take a look at, a similar piece of clothing that would have all of the seams and lines on it. So you can do this. Now I'm Googling this off screen just to ensure that I don't piss off the YouTube censors here. As when you look up bodysuits, you're going to find some that have transparency and things like that in it. I also want to pay attention to Chris Pine's shirt here. So I know that right down his front, I can't see anything. And so that would mean that I'm going to have to do something pretty similar in regards to the bodysuit. And so just looking at some of the examples I'm seeing online, it looks like the seams are actually pretty... they're pretty obvious where they go. So it's just kind of like a t-shirt. We're going to need to separate the front, the back, and the sleeves. So step number one, I'm going to do the sleeves. So I'm going to go and find the line of her shoulder here and kind of bring this up and around. And then we'll try and do this from the rear here too. And I want to watch out that I don't create any weird wobbling as I do this. So try and keep this really nice and straight. And I will bring this into her armpit here. Let's try and do this as a singular line. And we'll traverse the armpit. Like so. Now my brush is changing size here. I'm not sure if you can see this based off the camera's position. This is because I'm using currently the perspective distortion, which also distorts the scale of your brush. And so you may want to watch if you have that happen and you're not used to it happening. I want to try and keep this line a pretty consistent thickness here if I can. So with that, I'm going to go and identify the top of her shoulder here. So where I would like the front back split to occur, which I'm going to put about there. I'm going to need to split the bottom of the outfit as well. And so I'm going to go and put just a little bit of a line across here. So that'll give me the rear and front split there. And the only other one I really need to do is now going to come down the halfway point of her body. So I'm going to do this here for the lower part. And then I'm going to look up her body and just try and kind of continue that directionality into her armpit. Okay, so that's going to look pretty good. Again, we're going to end up having pants come up to about here on this outfit. And so it is going to read as just being a t-shirt. I'm not really worried about the lower portions of this. And so I really kind of like what I've got going on here. Now, what I'm going to do, the reason I did this with a paintbrush, is that it's going to make it a little bit easier for me to go into my polygroups. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create these polygroups here for my poly painting. So again, everything is black where I want these things removed. And so if I look at my polygroups, everything is kind of those two groups. Inside of the polygroup menu, I'm going to go to From Poly Paint, and I'm going to click on that. And within a second or so, we should end up with some polygroups. I'm going to turn the colorize off so that we can see it. And there it is there. Now you're going to notice that there are some weird little tiny other groups here. This is because the brush was soft. There was a fall off on the brush. And so wherever we ended up with kind of a gray range in that brush, we ended up with this other polygroup. So I'm just going to go into my polygroup menu here again and merge stray groups. We'll see if that does the trick. It does not. So I'm going to go in and just hide the gold group here, and we'll merge all of what's visible together. And then I'm going to also make sure that this thing is merged together. So that gives us our two groups like so. Now, technically, I don't even need this group here. If I were to go into my geometry and I go into my modify topology, we can go and delete this. So that's going to give me just the panels that make up this outfit. And so what I'm going to want to do here, if I turn colorize back on here, we're going to go and just make sure this whole thing is white, which really it should be. Make sure this whole thing is white here, which really it should be, because the polygrouping should have actually used our poly paint. So we should only have one color here. I'm just going to make sure that that's the case. And then the idea is that I want to put UVs on this. Now, there's one more seam I didn't create here, which needs to run down the arm here. And so I'm going to go and put that in now. I'm still on my paintbrush here. So we're just going to go and let's switch our color and just go and place this down the arm here. So again, I'll go and do the same process here. Polypaint, or not polypaint, rather polygroup. And we are going to group by polypaint, and we'll turn that on so we can see it. And then we'll delete hidden and group visible. And again, we should have the ability to move forward here now. So the one other thing that I want to do here before I go any further is I would like to ZBrush this to bring it down to a more reasonable. So this is the ZBrushing that we did a moment ago. I've got to keep groups on here now, but that doesn't matter because what's going to happen is this is just going to analyze these panels independently. So this shouldn't merge or close any of those holes, and should just give us now a really nice topological flow on everything. And then, so that's odd. I'm going to auto group her sleeves. There we go. Looks like it actually made the sleeves part of the chest here. So there we go there. I may ZBrush this again using now the ZBrush model as my topology. That's just going to soften it a little bit further. And I want to make sure that my smooth is turned on when I do this. So this is now going to become my sewing pattern. So I'm going to go into my Z plugins. I'm going to go into my UV master, and I'm going to hit polygroup and unwrap. What this is going to do is it's going to create UVs for me for this piece of geometry. So if we go and take a look at this now, I'm going to go to my UV map and morph UVs. This will unwrap this into the shape of my UVs, and this is now going to become my bodysuit. This is the shape that I want here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to need to rotate these sleeves so that they're in a better position. I do really like the front and back here, but I want to make sure that I am only doing things here in a way that makes sense. So let's turn off symmetry, and I'm going to rotate this into a more ideal pattern here, which I'm going to move down. We're going to clear this. I can't actually see my 0 to 1 box, and so I'm going to scale all of this down and kind of move it back again. If I go and put my floor on here, we might be able to see it, and I can't actually see it here. That's not actually the case. Z. Yeah, I'm not actually seeing where the 0 to 1 is, but that's okay. Again, I want to just get these things to be a little bit closer to where I would want them. Now I'm going to make the sleeves symmetrical, so I'm not too worried about this. I just need to make them separate like so. We'll clear the mask and we'll hit Morph UV. And if I morph it back, looks like it's still adhering to that same shape. So it didn't actually accept my changes, but that's okay. We've got what we want here now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear my colors. So we're going to go and turn off our polygroups. I'm going to go back into the draw palette here, and I'm going to go and switch my material to the flat color. And I'm going to go to Document, Export, and I'll go and save this where I want to create my pattern. So I'm going to go to my character called here. I'm going to go into my patterns, and I'm going to save this as bodysuit. And I'll hit save. We'll export that as is. We can morph it back, turn off our material, and unhide everything. And I can actually save this and keep going. So I would hit save as, save my tool as the next stage in the process here, and then go and do the jacket, and then go and do the pants. And I'm going to do this exact same process for each article of clothing that I'm going to need to simulate inside of Marvelous Designer. So with that, we've come to an end of preparing our pattern here inside of ZBrush. And in the next video, we'll take a look at blocking in our patterns inside of Marvelous Designer.